Okay, for question 5 we're asked to do some curve sketching. The really important thing in curve sketching isn't to plot points, it's to make sure we get the overall shape and any interesting relevant points, which are our crossing points on the axis. Just before we go any further, I'm going to read down to the very bottom line. This is quite commonly put at the end of questions, but down here it says each sketch must include the coordinates of any points where the graph crosses the coordinate axis and the new coordinates for the maximum point on the curve. So that's this one up here, where it's going up and now it's coming back down again. So this is our maximum. We'll do more about maximums later on in the course. Most of the marks for this question are actually for the points, so it's really important to read this. So I've started off just by drawing out my default graph, f of x. So we can see it's got a maximum here at -1, 2, crosses here at -1, 0, -2, 0, and here at 0, and it's called y equals f of x. For our first transformation, we're asked to draw 2 f of x. So we did some of these at GCSE. They're really important now at A level. We need to work out what this does. Because this is outside, it affects the y values. Because it's multiplying, it's a stretch. This is stretch. Y values. Or y direction. And its scale factor 2. So this is making our graph twice as big in the up and down sense. So this point here it's 0, it's still at 0 because 2 times 0 is 0, and this point here is still 0. But our graph is going to get bigger like that. So this point that is at x minus 1 is now going to be at 4 because it's had its y values doubled. This point here is still at -2, 0. And this point here is still at 0, 0. So we worked out what the stretch did and drew it on the axis. They don't need to be works of art, they don't need to be that accurate, but it does have to have the same shape, because that's the first mark in the question, and the right points, that's the second mark. For the next one, we're asked to draw f of x minus 1 in brackets. So this is f of -1. We need to work out what this does first, because this is inside, it affects the x values. Because it's a minus, it's a translation. So it's a translation of the x values, and we need to remember that the minus ones here actually take us to the right. Even though this minus suggests that it might be going to the left, it actually brings us to the right. So all we're going to do is move the graph one place along. So if we look at this one at -1 is now going to be at 0. This one that's at 0 is now going to be at 1, and this one that's at -2 is now going to be at -1. So moving this along, it's now going to look like this. And it's really important that we're starting with this previous graph up here. We're not looking at this one here and doing our f of x minus 1. So this point now is at -1, 0. This is now is 1, 0. And this bit here is at 0, 2. And that's that graph. For the last one, we're asked here to sketch y equals f of minus x. So this is inside, so it's x values. It's a minus, which means it's a reflection. So this is a reflection of the x values. So this is a swap this way. So this is our mirror line here. So you could, if you want to describe this as a reflection in the y-axis, or a reflection of the x values. So instead of going like this, our curve is going to go backwards. So it's going to come down like this. It's going to go up to here, and then it's going to go down that way. So this is just the same as our original curve here, but reflected that way. So this one here was at -1, 2. It's now going to be at 1, 2. This point here was at -2. It's now going to be at 2, 0. And this point is still at 0, 0. And that's the end of our curve sketching question.